forget, by the way, that we're here to try and get someone elected to office, and that is someone that stands for the idea of liberty, that which is the base of this nation that so many other people seem to have forgot. And at the very heart of that is that government can really do two things. They can either defend your rights and defend your property, or they can infringe on your rights or infringe on your properties. I want to introduce you to this next guy who understands the private property issue. Number one, because he's a farmer. Number two, because he's a really big Super Bowl champion. And he's running for Congress with that same idea of private property to take the seat of Doc Hastings. It's Clint Didier.
Thank you. Thank you very much. They told me to speak loud and into the mic so they can hear me in the back. Can you hear me in the back all right? All right. Well, first of all, here I want to just again wish Matt a happy 40th. I can remember back when I turned 40. It's been a few years ago. I just turned 55 April 4th. So Matt and I have the same month in common. We're both Aries. We're headstrong, we're Rams, and we like to butt heads with the Democrats, the establishment Republicans. But I want to thank all the veterans out here too. Because of your service, I got to live my American dream. I got to pursue the NFL. That was my dream, was to pursue that dream of playing in the NFL. One play was all I wanted to do. Just one play. And then I fooled them for 9 years. And I got to play in 3 Super Bowls because of the vets. I got to live my dream. And throughout my little talk here tonight, you're going to hear me reference Braveheart. How many out there remember Braveheart and have watched Braveheart? Well, in that movie, you'll remember when William was awaiting his execution the next morning, and he says, "Every man dies, but not every man lives." Matt Shea has served our country in the military forces. He served over there in Olympia, and I want him to serve as our 5th Congressional down the road here, alongside Clint Didier after I get into office. I want Matt to be the guy serving with me back in D.C. You know, we look at this state, we look at Inslee, and we look at what's going on in our state. And honestly, you know, as much research as I've done about the United Nations, I say get the UN out of the United States and the United States out of the UN, because this is nothing but bad news. Inslee's all into this global warming, which they now call climate change. It's an easier term. In my prayers that I'm saying all winter long, I'm asking the Lord, just keep that East Coast cool. Keep the snow a-dropping on that East Coast, because I want those people, if they're that naive as to believe that we can control the environment, then they'll be begging us to burn that fossil fuel to warm the globe back up. Maybe we'll start drilling and build some refineries. If they think we can warm it back up by burning it, then they'll be begging for it, and it has been dumping on them back there. But we've also got Common Core, and we've got the Department of Ecology in our own state, who has sworn to Earth's Charter. Earth Charter, where they say that Mother Earth is a living, breathing organism. I'm wondering where the separation is between church and state here. When you worship something, you are worshiping a God. So where is the separation between church and state? Matt is, and Matt will continue to fight against this within our state. And that's why another quote out of Braveheart, when William Wallace was just captured, and Robert the Bruce went up to face his dad who has leprosy, and he grabbed his dad and he threw him against the wall, and he says, "You deceived me, father." And he says, "I did not. In your heart you knew what was right. In our hearts we know what's right." And that is for we, the people of this state and this country, to remain a sovereign nation. A people that are strong-willed, that are determined. We're winners. We will never, ever fall in line to a one-world government, even though they're trying to push us that way. And remember what Obama said. I did not need Congress's approval to attack Libya. I was mandated by the UN. And then Uncle Joe Biden, when he says, the American people have got to be more accepting of the one world governance. Ladies and gentlemen, they're setting us up to bankrupt this country so it's an easier sell for us to fall into a one world government. No way. No way in hell are we ever going to go to a one world government. We will persevere. And before I go any further, I want to recognize a man of 93 years old, sharp as a tack, served in World War II, the greatest generation. Dean Ladd, Lieutenant Colonel Dean Ladd, please stand to be recognized. Thank you, sir, for your service. And here we are the day before Easter. He lives, ladies and gentlemen, he lives. Because God knew that we weren't strong enough to get there on our own, that we needed help. And so God sent his only son for us so that we may be saved. Glory be to God. So just a few days ago, I got the endorsement of Freedom Works, one of the strongest conservative constitutional groups in America. And they said it was a no-brainer. They looked at the other candidates, they went through their websites, and they said it's a no-brainer. So here's my 5-minute spill that I've been given around the state as I go around, and then this will be my conclusion. We the people. We the people. The first 3 words of the most powerful document in all of mankind, except the Bible. This is our country. We just got to have the courage and the fortitude to take it back. Charlton Heston stated, the American dream is not success or riches, it's freedom. Freedom. In the Didier campaign, we have a very simple equation. More government equals less freedom. Less government equals more freedom. You're being told today that if we can just elect a Republican Congress and a Republican president, we can take back our country. Let me remind you of 2010, when we had a Republican Congress and a Republican president, and we spent more money than ever before in the history of America. We ran our national debt up to the highest it's ever been. We got the Patriot Act that went into Department of Homeland Security, NSA, and a lot of other agencies claiming to be there to protect us. Yes. If I was playing in a Super Bowl right now, the Redskins would have been called for piling on. I mean, this is exactly what's going on. I mean, when we got a hold of this reins, all we did was just expand government. That's not the way it's supposed to go. Does anybody here really think in their lifetime they'll ever see the Patriot Act rescinded? I know it won't happen.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope so, but we better change a lot of people. Remember what Benjamin Franklin said. He who will trade liberty for security deserves neither. That's why it's critical this time. When the pendulum is swinging back to the Republican Party, that we make absolutely sure that we keep constitutional conservatives and we elect constitutional conservatives to the House and to the presidency. Because honestly, and you make sure they're candidates that'll make a pledge. Now, I haven't asked Matt about this pledge, but this is the pledge that I've made, and it's going national. No new taxes. No increase in existing taxes. Anything that grows the size of the federal government, regardless of party, I will vote against, so help me God. You see, that's really the only way back out of this mess. Some are going to tell you that's unrealistic. So when you hear that, you ask them, is what we're getting today realistic? Ladies and gentlemen, the size and scope of the federal government is the greatest threat to the American dream that Charlton Heston spoke of. And if we don't rein in the size of this government, then we're done as a country. And everything that we're doing today is academic. One of the primary abuses and grievances our founders listed against the King of England in the second half of the Declaration of Independence was this: he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent out his hither swarm of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. This is a great example of what is going on today in America. It's exactly what's happening. Our founders would have rolled over in their graves if they would have seen how many agencies we have, the regulations that we have, and the amount of money that is costing we the people. They would have rolled over in their graves if they would have seen the entangling alliances we have with that United Nations, bringing home all this regulation from them. Now is the time. Now is the time to realign with the Constitution of this greatest country ever on earth, the United States of America, and to reestablish the rule of law, the supreme law of the land that gives us, America, our sovereignty. Now is the time to realign with the Bill of Rights, especially the Second Amendment, the right that gives we the people to defend the other 9. I'll be damned if I allow our children, our grandchildren, and every generation to come to be sacrificed at the altar of big government and socialism. Let us stand together, we the people, shoulder to shoulder, and fight our way back to the light, to the truth, to our Constitution, and to the Lord God Almighty. And let us reaffirm that individual liberty is our highest political value. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a second-generation farmer 8 miles out of Pasco. Every spring I plant seeds to grow food for America. If I get elected, and I say if you will elect me, but you don't get to vote for me, I'm in the 4th. If I get elected, when I get elected, think positively, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. When I get elected, I'm going to go back to D.C. and I'm going to plant some new seeds. Seeds of freedom. Freedom. Again, I want to thank Matt for having me up here tonight. What an honor to be in a room with a lot of like-minded Americans that love our country, our freedom, our sovereignty, and we want to pass it on to the next generation. I'm not a lot of bark. Well, maybe I got a lot of bark, but I got some bite too. I want you to know, I'm not up here just popping off. I've wrote Matt Shea a maxed out check for his campaign. I encourage you to do the same. We have to have Matt Shea back over there. Matt Shea, Dave Taylor, Jason Overstreet, Jeff Hawley. These aren't politicians, folks. These are citizen statesmen. They're going to serve and then they're going to get back to their way of life. Thank you, and God bless America by Americans blessing God. Thank you.
Clint Didier. You got something else? All right, yeah, that's some good message. It'd be nice to clean up Washington, D.C. But we're here to talk about Matt Shea to clean up Washington, our state. I don't know if I told, by the way, I've got some different terms. We call it the Gaia of the earth. We worship the Gaia. And our governor, see, I classify him as a greenie tree-hugging, dope-smoking, bunny-kissing liberal Democrat voter who won't shave under his armpits, rides a Cannondale bike, and chews granola all day. But that's my term for it. Thank you. He's talking about the Second Amendment. You know, how many people in here are friends with me on Facebook? Few? If you saw it today, I got to take Gail Gerlach to lunch. Yeah. No, this is a guy who used the Second Amendment, or our 24th Amendment, to defend his very life. And the prosecutor went after him balls to the walls. $300,000 was his legal bills to defend his defending his life. Well, Matt Shea and a couple other guys with the Freedom Agenda have assured me that you guys have got a stand your ground bill ready. Every year. Throwing it in there to get this finally in statute, so when you have to use a deadly force to defend yourself, there are two confrontations you have to survive. One is the confrontation with the bad guy. Then, as Gail found out, the bigger confrontation is that one with the law afterwards if they come at you. By the grace of God, he was acquitted. It looked like it all the way. But when I got the opportunity, I said, yeah, I want to take an American who used the 24th part, or the Article 1, Section 24 of our Constitution to defend his life, and did it in a hell of a shot too, wasn't it? Hell of a shot. So anyway, but another person, part of that freedom agenda that we talk about, and it's gaining ground, and I think they had a great success. I'll introduce you to State Representative from the 15th Legislative District, Representative Dave Taylor, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, good evening. Can you hear me in the back? All right, perfect. I'm going to do a little housekeeping before I get going here. First, boy, these are bright lights. David Trezzi, thank you so much for tonight. Beautiful. You do such a wonderful job. Your hospitality is amazing. Folks, help me thank the Trezzis. And how about Rick? Where'd Rick run off to? There he is. You know, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, Matt said, hey, come on, we're going on the radio. Okay. He drags me across, we were in the Capitol, drags me across the parking lot upstairs, 4th floor, get on the radio, and there's this crazy dude screaming about liberals and gun control, and I'm like, man, I like this guy. So Rick, thanks for all you're doing. I'm David Taylor, 15th District State Representative. Tonight, my wife Molly is with me. Folks, I can speak for Matt. I don't speak for Matt often, but I can tell you we can't do what we're doing if it wasn't for my wife Molly and his wife Victoria. So, thank you both. The final piece of housekeeping. Where's Mike? Mike Shea. When you need a sign, that's the guy. Okay, so make sure and talk to Mike tonight so you know where to get your signs. So, thanks to all of you, Matt Shea was elected in 2008. And shortly thereafter, in March of 2009, I was appointed to replace Dan Newhouse, who became Secretary of Agriculture. And I got to Olympia with 30 days left in session, and no committee work, no real background on the bills, and they said, okay, just vote with the majority. Okay. So I started reading bills and doing research, and honestly, and I've never told Matt this, so Matt was one of the guys that they said, typically you don't vote with. Okay. And so immediately, honestly, I'm like, okay, I'm not sure about Matt Shea. I don't know. He sounds a little weird. I got to watch out for this guy. And what I saw in those 30 days and in the following years is somebody who has incredible leadership, who has just completely honest all the time, incredible integrity, is solidly pro-life, stands by the Second Amendment, Article 1, Section 24 of the state constitution. And I thought, and I look back now and I think to myself, really, this is the guy I'm supposed to stay away from? Well, obviously not. And so we've worked together Since we've both been there, now he's got 3 months seniority on me. Dang it. But we've worked together. We work closely. We've this year lived together, and you know, it's rare when you have the opportunity to work, let alone serve with an individual of the stature that Matt is. I mean, he's just an incredible individual. He serves for the House Republican Caucus as an assistant floor leader. His job is really twofold. Number one, as bills go through the system in committee work, the committees that he sits on, he tries to amend them to make them less bad. Because honestly, there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to vote for him. So vote for the bill. So he tries to fix as much as he can. But he also, as we're doing floor work, is responsible for putting together the points of argument, the debate. And one of the pieces that really sticks out to me is last year with House Bill 1588, which is universal background gun control. You know, Matt really was, for the House Republican Caucus, our lead on that, putting together the debate, putting together the amendments, framing it so that when we vote no, which I would hope that most of us were, our folks could take that message home in a way that the liberals, they'd be protected from the liberal media. Thanks to Matt's work, though, we never got the chance to vote no, because it died.
Yeah.
Over the last 4 years, Matt's leadership role has taken a new turn, and he gets to hear things in leadership like, what are they doing? And they're referring to Jason and I. So he gets to answer, you know, when did you know? Are you part of it? And so we have a lot of fun at Matt's expense, and he gets to walk in at night and say, Matt, guess what we did? And that usually is a heavy sigh, a couple of grumbles. All right, tell me what you did. So, yeah, he's our go-between for the leadership. So, you know, from somebody that works in that position, it's nice to have somebody like Matt there. Quite frankly, this is gonna sound a little egotistical, I think, but I think Matt's pretty lucky to have me. He's got somebody he can blame. Clint, you asked, are we ever going to see the repeal of the Patriot Act? And I think, unfortunately, we will not. But with men like Matt Shea serving in Olympia, we don't have to have it repealed. We'll nullify it. We'll nullify it. And Matt's led the charge to do that on a variety of levels: Obamacare, NDA, indefinite detention, Patriot Act, warrantless surveillance. He's been a leader. The three of us have been leading that fight, but Matt's been really a staunch supporter of everything we're doing there. Before I wrap up, because you didn't come here to hear me talk, you probably saw in the spokesman, you know, Matt apparently has a white horse now because he rode it to Nevada. In all seriousness, yeah, so we made our trip to Nevada. Folks, that's not about cows, it's not about tortoises, that's a land grab. I've spent 20 years of my life fighting property rights, land rights, water rights. That's a land grab. And I was happy to travel down there with Matt to put kind of, I think, a different view on things. And I think the work that Matt's been doing and I've been doing, we now have a coalition of Western states that are going to stand together and fight these issues. So to wrap up, you know, I've already said it. The honesty, the integrity, the leadership that Matt has are incredible. And I thank all of you for sending him to Olympia. Folks, he's a patriot. But more importantly, I got to tell you, he's one of my best friends. And so, you know, I thank you for sending him in 2008. And Lord willing, and with all your help, you'll send him in 2014. God bless all of you.
Representative Dave Taylor. that property rights issue is a big deal. I did a couple years ago. I did an inventory, if you would, and found out that you take the federal government ownership, you take the state government ownership, you take the cities and the counties. The government owns 44 out of 100 acres in Washington, and it's growing. It's growing. I've been talking to these guys about a zero net loss of private lands bill. And everybody here at the Freedom Agenda, Jeff Holy. Jeff, you here, by the way? Raise your hand. Jeff Holy, ladies and gentlemen. Matt, talked to Senator Brian Dansel about it. Everybody's going, oh my God, yeah. So that's a biggie, and I'm glad that these guys are here fighting. But let's get right to it here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the guy we're going to send back to Olympia to keep this fight up. The leader that's kind of getting those people like Dave that now they say you got to watch out for his votes. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Shea.
Thank you. So, a couple of weeks ago, the toilet in our law office in the basement overflowed. And calling the plumber, plumber says, you guys buy some of those high efficiency toilets for the upstairs? Yeah, we did. And he said, yeah, well, there's not enough water to get it out to the sewer line. So literally, I'm in a world of crap because of radical environmentalism in Washington State. Kidding me. So I'd like to say thank you to a few people tonight. First, I would like to thank my wife, Victoria, who allows this to happen and has put up with so much and been there through thick and thin, Spokesman Review front page and not. Victoria, please stand up. Next, I would like to thank my mom and dad, and specifically my mom, because she says the story is that I came out bellowing and I haven't stopped since. So Mom and Dad, if you'd please stand up, let's give them a round of applause. And I want to thank Dave and Molly Taylor. Dave has been with me through thick and thin. And in Olympia, having brothers stand shoulder to shoulder with you and go through the fire with you, it's almost like combat down there. And I really mean it. I mean, it is constant pressure, constant nagging, constant... Hey, Shea, will you get Taylor and Overstreet under control? And I look at him and say, no, they're doing the right thing. Why aren't you voting with us, you know? So, Dave and Molly, please stand up. One of my best friends in the whole world. So as I start every speech, but particularly this weekend, this resurrection weekend, our hope is not in man, our hope is in Jesus Christ. Amen? All right. So, that said, it's great to be with all of you pro-life, gun-toting, Constitution-loving, homeschooling, freedom-loving, 4th District Americans today. I love it. So 6 years ago, I went to Olympia and I said I was going to vote against tax increases. I said I was going to fight against all this out-of-control government. I said I was going to be a champion of more freedom. And I could stand before you honestly today and say that I did what I said I was going to do 6 years ago. And what's really cool about that is people are now actually calling Spokane Valley the capital of free Washington. I love that. I'd like to honor a couple people tonight as well because they have done such a phenomenal job in really setting an example for the rest of the country. And they are Ed Pace and Rod Higgins, who are councilmen on Spokane Valley City Council. If you guys could stand up, let's give them a round of applause. So I want to tell you about these guys. So a budget in Spokane Valley of $30 million. and they have $28 million in reserve and no debt except the 90-day revolving debt. That is an example for the rest of the country. That is an example for Detroit, I think. Don't you guys? Yeah. Last but not least, I'd like to honor my good friend and really good friend who has, I think, completely turned around the attitude in county government because of his honesty, his integrity, his transparency. And he is the first Republican. You would think that establishment folks would not run somebody against him in the primary, but they did. They recruited somebody against him, even though he's the first Republican treasurer in 54 years. Rob Chase, please stand up. Let's give you a round of applause. So I'm going to ask you tonight, how many of you are going to change the world? Raise your hand. It should be every hand in this room saying that. And the reason I say that is because the rest of the world is looking to America and is looking specifically to Republicans, conservative Republicans in America for leadership. They're looking to us for leadership. It's not enough anymore to say, you know, we're a conservative and talk a good game. We've got to live a good game. How many Republicans in Washington State in the last 40 years controlled both the House and the Senate, and then lastly, the governor's mansion? How many years have Republicans controlled those? Anybody know? Last 40? Two. The old ways of moderating our message are not working, of being afraid of our own shadow are not working. What works, I think, is not just talking about it, but leading, championing freedom. That's what works. So let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. You can't just say I'm pro-gun. Question is, like Jeff Holy says, do you carry and are you trained to use it? What about pro-gun legislation? How much pro-gun legislation have you sponsored? Together with the Freedom Agenda, we crafted the floor amendments to defeat gun control in Washington State. But we didn't just stop there. We went on the offense. And we said, you know what? We should have a sales tax exemption for firearms and ammunition in Washington State because everyone should have affordable self-defense in the state of Washington. It's not enough either to say that you're just opposed to tax increases. The question is, how did you vote? Did you vote for a cap and trade scheme like some of our fellow legislators here locally? Did you vote for a budget that depended on $1 billion in tax increases like some of our legislators who call themselves Republican did locally? Instead, through social media, we were able to kill the zombie gas tax that kept dying and coming alive 7 times. That is freedom and liberty. But we can't just stop there and say, oh, we defeated something. We got to go on the offense. And that means we introduced a 2/3 requirement to raise taxes as a constitutional amendment and to lower the sales tax in Washington State. That's going on the offense. Let's talk about the pro-life issue, one of these issues where Republicans are afraid of their own shadow. And you would think it's the first right enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, right? You'd think we would say, hey, let's champion that. Going on the offense means like what Dave Taylor did this year, and that was to introduce an amendment to the budget to defund Planned Parenthood and give that money to disabled veterans. That's going on the offense. We don't need people who are going to say one thing on the campaign trail and do another in Olympia. We need leaders. And we need people who are going to build coalitions around issues. All of our Freedom Agenda bills, we had 50 Democrat co-sponsors on our bills. So when you hear somebody say, well, Matt Shea has marginalized himself on the extreme right and he can't get anything done, well, I'm over there with the Democrats apparently. I don't know. It's pretty interesting that we get that gets said about us, and we have reached across and we have bridged in extraordinary ways. And let me give you one specific example. When Matt Shea the arch right-wing guy who's a Christian conservative, gets invited to speak in downtown Seattle by an anarchist lesbian to a crowd of Democrats. We are making progress in Washington State. And that's because leadership is not the ability to compromise. It's the ability not to. It's the ability to articulate your principles in such a way as to bring people over to your point of view. That's why Ronald Reagan was so good, and that takes courage. The easy road is a yes vote. The easy road is not carrying the banner for freedom and just staying under the radar. The easy road is going along to get along, and the easy road is worrying about getting reelected. There was a movie, actually, and I'm digressing a little bit. There was a movie called Gattaca a long while back. And in that movie, one of the brothers is genetically superior to the other brother. And they have this swimming race, and they keep going out, and they keep going out, and this genetically superior brother keeps beating him. And then finally one day, the non-genetically superior brother beats him, and the brother asks him, "How did you do that?" And he said, "Because I swam and didn't save any energy for the return trip." That is how we need to treat politics. We need to go into politics in Olympia and not let the naysayers say, "Oh, you can't do that." We need to do it. We need to do it because that's what our founding fathers did. They didn't worry about it. They didn't worry about what the English were going to say. They just did it because it was the right thing to do. So I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about Nevada. So, first of all, Nevada and this whole thing with the Bundy Ranch is not an isolated incident. It happened with the Hage family in Nevada also, happened with the Sacketts up in North Idaho, happens actually at the state level with Bill Demers here in Washington State and eastern Washington. You know, this administration has declared war on rural America, and we need to call it that. It is war on rural America. Doesn't matter that the Bundys had a first in time, first in right, water right, and grazing right. They ignored that. Doesn't matter that when the court order said seize the cattle, federal government came in and shot them. Doesn't matter that they set up a First Amendment zone, which is kind of the most silly thing I've ever heard, actually. Perhaps we should do that for the Spokesman Review. Doesn't matter that the federal government came in, even though the court order said to seize the cattle. They destroyed personal property, actually destroyed some of the stock watering tanks. But here's the troubling part about that. Let's just ignore everything else. Here was the real troubling part about that. The federal government pointed sniper rifles at women and children. As a veteran, and some of these guys were veterans. Some of them were veterans. As a veteran, I took an oath. I took an oath to protect and defend American citizens, not point a gun at them. We have to talk to our friends and neighbors. If somebody gets an order like that and they are working for your bureaucracy, they should disobey that order. That is the American thing to do. And I want... And I want to tell you the story of what actually happened those 2 days. So there was a huge ramp up of the federal government, huge ramp up of the federal government down there on the Bundy Ranch. And then Cliven Bundy one morning, he said, "Well, I think I need to talk to the sheriff today because the sheriff's been non-existent." And the sheriff actually showed up out there. And he talked to the sheriff. And the sheriff said, "I'm going to work on negotiating a deal." And Cliven Bundy said, "No, you're not. You're going to go back, and you, sheriff, are going to do your job, and you are going to disarm every federal agent in Clark County that is involved in this operation." That was what Cliven Bundy said. Sheriff left. Hour later, he appears on stage, and he says, "Well, BLM is ceasing operations. I think we've got victory." And Cliven Bundy said, "That's not what we asked you to do, Sheriff. Cowboys, get your guns. Going to get our cattle back." And literally, 100 cowboys with flags rode down off that hill and went and stood versus the BLM. Now think about that. That is happening in America today, very close to April 19th. which was and is the anniversary, Patriots Day, of Lexington and Concord. Think about that. It's happening in America today. It's happening in America today. And that, because they had that courage, is why the BLM actually backed down. And that's why I stood and stand unashamedly with the Bundy family in Clark County, because I got to tell you something. The federal government sending armed troops in and sniper rifles to collect an unpaid bill is not American and should never stand in this country or in the state of Washington if they ever try it here. Amen. 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 Thank you. There's a lesson out of all this too that we need to keep in mind, that Nevada is what happens when we stand our ground on principle as Americans. We don't waver, and we truly unite together. We win. That is a formula, not just for Clark County, Nevada. It is a formula for all of America and Washington State. It is a formula for all of America and Washington State. So we need to stay united and ignore the naysayers. You know, you'll get some people that say, somebody actually said this recently, you know, you guys are ineffective. You guys can't get that stuff done. And I look at him, and Dave Taylor looks at him now and says, you know what, that's really weird, because we now have a network in Washington State that we built over the last 3 years of over 75,000 activists that we can hit one button and touch through social media. Our country isn't sliding further into a pit of hopelessness and despair because we are too far right. It's instead doing that because people can't trust politicians to stand for anything. That's why the Freedom Agenda, we went out there, we said, you know what, they got an agenda for everything. Why don't we have a freedom agenda for once? That's why the Freedom Agenda is the most successful slate of conservative bills in over 2 decades in Washington State. That's why. And I want to take a little bit of time and go through this because I think it's important. Out of 65 bills, 65 that we introduced as part of our Freedom Agenda, lower taxes, less government, and more freedom. 65 bills. We got 42 hearings. Usually we might get 1 or 2. We got 32 passed out of the House or the Senate, and we got 12 signed into law without veto by our liberal governor. Now, some people might say, Matt, you haven't sold me yet. Well, we also had 25 national news stories on those bills, and they became model legislation for other states around us that passed them as well. That is important, too, that we lead that way. So let me talk about what a couple of those bills are. One of them was a ban on Sharia law in specialty courts in Washington State. We could do it in Washington. We could do it anywhere in the country. One of them was opening up 1,000 miles, actually more than that, thousands of miles of roadway in Washington State for ATV use, which is going to help rural economies and get people back outdoors using our public lands. One of them, my favorite, was to help what I believe is going to be the next Amazon of the food industry. You can order online, and it comes farm to your table. And the owner of that company is actually here today, but I want to tell this. $32,000 plus is what he was paying in fees a year in Washington State with 39 separate regulatory jurisdictions. You want to take a guess at how much he was paying in Idaho? $65, and he had 1 regulatory jurisdiction. So we thought, you know, maybe we should kind of help lessen that. So we actually got a bill through that lessened it to one regulatory jurisdiction in Washington. We couldn't get it down to $65, but we got it down to $1,000, which was much less. And Mike Conrad, if you could stand, it was a good thing for America and a good thing for Washington State. Another bill that we got through was allowing and legalizing conversion kits for our disabled veterans in Washington State, which was actually illegal, if you can believe that. We had dozens of distributors coming into Washington State now opening up new businesses, just from a simple change that helps disabled veterans. Another Freedom Agenda bill. We also had a partial end to the Growth Management Act in some of our rural counties. And like I said, we stopped gun control, we stopped the gas tax increase 7 times. And by the way, on the gas tax increase, one of the local lobbying firms sent out a paper that said, you've got to vote for the gas tax increase, it's for the children. I saved it because I'm going to be using that throughout the campaign. You got to be kidding me. But here's one you may not have heard of. Dave Taylor and Jason Overstreet helped negotiate at the end of session a delay of the implementation of part of Common Core. That is a huge victory for Washington State. So what does all of this mean? It means this: we don't need a majority, although I do want one, okay? We don't need a majority to win. We just need to stand for the truth, because the truth crosses party lines, especially the principles of freedom and liberty. And we need to be clear about what we believe in. We need to be clear on our vision that we want to restore a God-honoring constitutional republic. We need to be clear on our mission that we need to show up and defend freedom locally. The forces of evil and Marxism depend on one thing, and that's us not showing up. That's what they depend on. And we need to go on the offense. We need to go on the offense. Again, the freedom agenda isn't just about legislators, it's about all of us. And it was because of all of you being involved on social media that we were able to make so many changes. But I want to talk tonight really briefly about one thing. If we go on the offense united, we win. But unity isn't a one-way street. And unfortunately in our Republican Party, we have some people that cry unity in one breath and whisper treachery in the next. So what's the solution? Well, the freedom agenda seems to be a point of unity. Our party platform seems to be a point of unity. Effective leadership seems to be a point of unity. And the Constitution seems to be a point of unity. So why don't we focus on those instead of recruiting against our own incumbent Republicans and threatening our ability to get a majority in Washington State? That should be the message that goes out to the Republican Party. I want to tell you, if you get a chance, because Tom Reed, every time he sees me, he's like, Matt, make sure to plug your radio show. So I got to do that. So like Freedom Agenda on Facebook. Make sure you like my page on Facebook, Matt Shea. Also follow us on SoundCloud and Podbean, where we have our radio shows. I'm on 106.5 Tom Reed, 106.5 Tom Reed. Every Tuesday morning at 8:30, it's 106.5 FM. And I have commentaries that play throughout the time. I want to end with this. We have got to be bold and courageous in our faith. We've got to be bold and courageous in our defense of the Constitution. We've got to be bold and courageous in our articulation of freedom. It's not just Matt Shea, it's all of us. People that love freedom and liberty, that are patriots in America. The world, like I said, is looking to us for leadership, not our president. Not our president, us. Let's embrace that. Let's not be afraid of it. Let's embrace that. My friend, the other day, I went to see him. He's dying of cancer. He's got a huge brain tumor. His face is horrible, and his head is twice the size it normally is. He's dying. And I walk into his room, and you know what he's got on the television set? He can barely talk. He's watching Braveheart. He can barely talk, and he still wants to fight. He still wants to fight. So my question to you tonight is, how many of you are going to change the world and help me fight to restore a God-honoring constitutional republic in America? Raise your hand. All right. So together we can change the world so that our kids and our grandkids can live in peace and prosperity and freedom. And may we bless God because we kept America free. God bless all of you. Thank you for being here tonight on my 40th birthday as well.
Matt Shea. And remember, no donation is too large except what the government says you can't get any more than. So maximum donations are gladly accepted because it's going to take money to win. Yeah, the world is watching America, and America is watching TV. You know, that's sad, but how true it is. You're all involved, I know you are, but there's so many people that just, what's on the tube tonight? That's why you got to reach out to your friends and say the things that Matt's talked about, say the things that Dave Taylor said, because these threats are real, and they affect each and every one of us, and including the businesses that are trying like dogs to just keep people employed and bring goods to our services. By the way, Mike, did you want to do something here real quick? Yeah, come on up, ladies and gentlemen. Mike Shea on his son's 40th birthday.
You know, I'm often asked by a lot of people, how did you raise Matt Shea? How did he become what he is? What did you do to him? And I always reply, the kid's got balls. So I'd like to read you a quote that Teddy Roosevelt made in 1910, just after he toured Europe. On April 23rd of that year, he gave an address at the Sorbonne Institute in Paris, France. In that address was a quote that I'd framed many years ago, and I gave to Matt to hang in his office or to hang wherever he was. But I said, you gotta understand it and you gotta believe it. And so I think over the years he paid attention to it because he epitomizes what Teddy Roosevelt tried to get across. Here's the quote. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcomings, but does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms and great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end of triumph, of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails and dares greatly. So that is his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I think after all the years of living with Matt Shea and with raising along with AJ, I've watched this kid develop into one hell of a human being. And I think he meets every criteria of what Teddy Roosevelt tried to get across. Thank you.
By the way, just got a quick reminder, there's also cake and stuff in the back if you want to get that. We talked about the how tough it is for businesses to get going. I mean, this, small businesses in Spokane, that's the lifeblood of our economy. I mean, I know Inslee's, we got to save Boeing, they're iconic. Well, are any of the other businesses here any less iconic than Boeing? Absolutely not. Well, there's one of those guys I wanted to ask come up tonight, talk about a small business owner, kind of give you some perspective on that. Give a round of applause for Glenn Dobbs. Glenn, can I get you to come up?
Well, it's very warm up here, thanks to the lights. I wanted to point out, I used to be as tall as Clint Didier. As you get older, strange things begin to happen to you. So Clint, you know what you have to look forward to. It's right here. And then I used to dress like Dave over here. And then I got so I couldn't afford it because I was running my own business. I couldn't afford the hat and the boots, but boy, I'll tell you, I sure admire yours. I run a small company called Mines Management. We're a small public company headquartered in Spokane. We've been working at permitting a large mining project in northwestern Montana for 9 years. We're working with 5 different agencies, 4 at the federal level and 2 at the state level. I know I said 5, but it's actually 6. For 9 years, we've spent approximately $70 million trying to bring into production a small mining operation that would employ about 350 to 400 people in the little town of Libby, which has a 20% unemployment rate. We understand what permitting is. We understand what bureaucracy is. I have to say, folks, I've been involved politically since 1965. And some of you, I don't think that any of you in here are old enough to remember, do you? But does anyone here remember a book named, or called None Dare Call It Treason? More gray hairs here than I had seen. But that was an excellent book published in 1964 during the Goldwater years that opened the eyes of an awful lot of people to what's going on in this country. And subsequently, there have been a number of other very good books written on the same subject. And it's so delightful to be with this group of people, because I can remember in 1966, 7, 68, 69, when I was at university in Bellingham, if you got all the conservatives together, which we frequently did, we took up no more than 1 booth at Denny's restaurant. So it's grown. And I should tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it just terrifies the living daylights out of the other side. Because by a number of standards and a number of polls, the United States has grown increasingly conservative over the last 30 years. And now that is beginning to accelerate. And this is the reason that the Marxist-Leninists in this country, the Marxist-Leninist establishment, has had to accelerate their program. And of course, they have no shortage of depth on their team, by which they can just throw new people into the fray as need be. And we see them in the U.S. Congress all the time. And yes, they are in the Republican, they sit on the Republican side of the aisle as well as the Democrat side of the aisle. Democrat-Republican, as you know, means nothing today. The real difference, the line of demarcation today, is between freedom-loving people and those who want to be the rulers. And if you look around the world today at any of the socialist, communist countries that has existed in the last 80 years, you'll find that all of those countries have been run by about 3 to 4% rulers and about 96, 97% rulees. And I can tell you right now that those folks in Washington, D.C. and the people in the establishment in this state do not intend to be rulers, they intend to be rulees. And I think most of us here, did I get that wrong? Yeah. They intend to be the rulers, and most of us here in this room will be the rulees if they have their way. Someone great once said, I don't remember who it was, and if he didn't, he should have said it, but, and that is that liberalism is a mental disorder. And I can think back to my days in university when I was a new conservative. And I used to look at those liberals on campus up at Western and Bellingham and think, you know, there's something wrong here. There's a disconnect. Our side apparently doesn't understand what's going on, and they're a lot smarter than we are because they have all the college professors and some of the sharper students on campus. But over the years, I began to realize that it's just exactly the opposite today. One of the very prominent radio talk show hosts describes the other side as, many of them as being the low information crowd. And that's what it's become. The thinkers, the intellectuals, the appreciators of the fine things in life that are provided in a free society today are all on the conservative side. And if you look at the colleges, the universities, the high schools, the grade schools, and so many other institutions in the courts and the legislative halls today, we're looking at a country that is largely populated and largely run by people who have a mental disorder. And I caution you to not take that too lightly, because those of us who read history have read about World War I, World War II, we've read about Vietnam, all the other conflicts that we've been in. I just finished reading a book titled The War That Ended Peace by Margaret McAllister. And it was a study on World War I. And as I was reading that book, I was thinking forward from 1914, August of 1914, when World War I began, to the present day. And we've lived in a perpetual state of war. The United States has since then. Why is that? The reason for that is that it makes it easier to control people. And we think of Germany in the 20s, the 30s, and the early 40s. And then we think of China under Mao Zedong. We can think of Romania, Albania, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Cuba. And the atrocities, the millions of atrocities that were committed under those regimes. And then you try talking to other people about that, and they will tell you, and you point out the parallels that are taking place in this country today, and they will tell you, yes, but we would never go there. Why? Why could we not? And you'll get all kinds of answers. But I think back on a book, one of the first books that I ever read by Ayn Rand many years ago, in which, in the introduction to the book, she said, liberals, and I'm paraphrasing, she said, liberals are metaphysical killers waiting for the opportunity to become physical killers. Absolutely. Liberalism is a mental disorder, and you and I had better never forget that. Now, I want to move on to a positive note here. Something just crossed my mind. Do you know how to starve a liberal to death? Yeah, you hide his welfare check in his work boots. Yeah. And I realize in some quarters you're not supposed to say that anymore, but I've been using that joke for the better part of 30 years now. And I just love it. I can't resist it. But I want to talk to you a little bit just for the moment here, and I'm going to wrap this up very quickly. Is that door still open? Yeah, I might ask. Clint, I think, is the biggest guy in the room, and I used to be, but we want to block this door for a minute, so please don't anyone think about leaving, because I wouldn't want anyone to get hurt. Okay? There we go. There we go. Now we get down to the serious stuff here. Okay? I want to ask you, how many of you, barring those who are in public office or aspiring to it right now, we'll take you out of the equation, but how many of you would like to trade places with Matt Shea for the next 10 years? Oh, come on, there has to be. One, two. That's it? I can't imagine why. But you know, it's interesting how God raises people up to stand in the breach. This has always been the case, and of course the scripture is just full of sit down. Oh, dessert. Oh, I'm sorry. The scripture is just full of stories of how God tapped people, men, to stand in the breach, to hold the wall. And so when I ask you, who would be willing to walk in Matt's shoes for the next 10 years, we get two hands. And there's a good reason for that. Most of us are not cut out to do that job. Most of us are really not gladiators. And that's what this country needs. We need gladiators, and we need more and more of them. Now, because you and I can't do that, we're not going to do that. Then the question becomes, then what can we do? What can we do to add our weight to the struggle? It's really very simple, but it requires a decision on your part. Because all of us have three things that we can contribute to this cause, to this movement: time, money, and influence. And all of us have those in varying proportion. Some of us have time because we're no longer working, we're retired, we're, for whatever reason, we have time that we can devote to a campaign. We have time that we can devote to spreading the word. We have time that we can devote to writing letters to the spokesman reviewed. That's what we should be doing, is reviewing the spokesman and sending those cards and letters in every week telling them what they're doing wrong. Because I have good news for you folks, the spokesman review is not going to be around very long. I don't have any inside information, but I can identify trends, and I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, but I can tell when newspapers are beginning to become passé. So I think you ought to take advantage of it and write them a letter once in a while. When they go after Matt Shea in the newspaper, you need to write them well-informed, well-thought-out, sensible, unemotional letters expressing your dissatisfaction with what they're doing to Matt and all of the like-minded people in this community. So we have time that we can devote to these campaigns. We also have influence. And I know, we go home and we ask ourselves, look in the mirror, and we say, golly, who can I influence? I don't influence anybody. Well, you do. There are many, many, many people out there who listen to what you say. So all you have to do with your influence is simply endorse Matt time and time and time again. Because the low information crowd, particularly within the county Republican Party, are continually banging on Matt. They're continually. And the greater the extent to which you and I stand up and take his side and speak out loudly and articulately and boldly to support what he stands for and what we stand for, the quicker those people are going to recede into the background, and you're going to hear less and less. Matt has a marvelous political future ahead of him. Matt has become a great leader in the state of Washington. He's widely known. He has very high name familiarity across the state. But Matt has a calling, in my opinion, that goes beyond the 4th legislative district in the state of Washington. He's my legislator. I get to vote for him, and I get to talk about him, and I get to give him money. Which brings us to the third point. It's funny how these things just kind of lead one to another, isn't it? So we have time and we have influence, but we also have money. And that's what we're here for today. If anyone came, is there anyone here who came to tonight's meeting not realizing that this was a fundraiser? Would you be so bold as to raise your hand? There aren't even two hands. There's not one. Well, God bless you. And oh, there was one here. Man, where have you been? This is a fundraiser for Matt's campaign, and I want to talk to you about that. On your table should be a number of little envelopes that look something like this. They say Matt Shea on the back of them. It says something about the campaign to elect Matt Shea on the front. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read them. But if you would, at your table, if each one of you would just pick up one of those envelopes right now and look at it, because I want to point out something, and I don't want, there they are, and I don't want to do it alone. So if you would, just look around and get an envelope on your table and put it in front of you. Come on, don't be bashful. Those of you who are doing it, I want you to look with disdain at those at your table who are not doing it, okay? We want to embarrass them. We want to humiliate them. We want to use peer pressure to get people to pick up an envelope. Okay, is there anyone who does not have an envelope? Raise your hand. Look at that. Not a hand goes up. Okay, you will notice on the front of the envelope, that's the place where the stamp goes. These will not clear the post office, so do not even think about putting a stamp on them. Do not think about putting a stamp on them. It says Committee to Elect Matt Shea, P.O. Box 14218098447A, Bravo 21. Wow, Spokane Valley. All right, ignore that. Turn it over. Turn it over to the back side. The flap, it says Matt Shea, 4th District State Representative. Thank you for your generous support. That's the operative phrase here. This is going to become a Thanksgiving party, and all of us are going to participate. So now if you open it up, you'll find that there's all kinds of fine print on the inside. And I'm not going to take the time to read through it for you, but I'll just paraphrase it, sort of summarize it for you. And it goes like this. These legislative campaigns are extremely expensive. There's an element in Spokane County, in this area, who have nominated, who have urged, I believe, a very naive young man to run against Matt. And as a result, Matt's going to require considerably more funding for his campaign this time than he's had in previous years. There's a big difference between running against a serious person who's trying to take you out and a Playboy bunny. You can laugh, that's all right, go ahead. I will not repeat that. So we have a serious campaign ahead of us here, folks, and what I'd like for you to do is, if you would, all of you who have that envelope in front of you, if you would pull out your checkbook right now. Don't stand up to leave. Clint's in front of the door. God is watching. I would like for you to pull out your checkbook right now, and I'd like for you to write a check for Matt Shea's campaign. And it can be as little as $2,000. And I can understand some of us are strapped. We're living in difficult times. But seriously, everything counts, whether it's $50, $500, or $5,000. If it's $5,000, we need to talk. But please take out your checkbook, dip into your pocket, get some cash, and write as big a check as you can afford to write for this campaign. It's vitally important. Remember, only 2 of you raised your hand who are willing to think in terms of standing in Matt's shoes over the next 10 years. That means there are 198 of us here who are not willing to do that. And out of the 198, at least 198 should write a pretty nice check tonight. Okay? So where are we going to collect the checks? Right here. Okay, Clint's going to be standing by the door. And okay, for those of you who sponsored tables, you are table captains. There's a green envelope on your table to put all the checks in. So what you do in order for the people at your table to be able to leave tonight, you collect the checks and you use the little rubber stamp that's on your table that has a little foot on it, and you stamp everyone's hand who gives you the check so Clint will let them out. And then the table captains, you'll turn your envelopes in over here as you're going out. But I don't want to belabor this point, folks, but please, please, please give generously tonight. Write as big a check as you can. Do not plan on taking it home. Do not put a stamp on it. Don't even think in those terms. Think only of leaving the check here tonight as you're leaving. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Glenn Dobbs, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, I've got one other guy I want to introduce you tonight coming up here to come up and talk a little bit. But I wanted to point out something that Matt brought up. When he was down in Nevada, the Clives asked the sheriff to go do something because the sheriff has a very specific role. And a sheriff has to be able to stand up against a federal government. Now, our current sheriff's not ready to take a stand with Oath Keepers and do that. But there is someone running for office who is. Douglas Orr? Doug, you here? Where's Douglas? He's standing around here somewhere. He's running for sheriff, so I wanted to make sure you knew he was here tonight. But there is another gentleman I met. I hosted a candidate forum for the 4th. And I kind of pride myself in being a little smarter than most politicians, which means I have about an 8th grade education. So, you know, when it comes to conservative ideology, there's a couple of keywords out there. But there was one guy, now he didn't get appointed, but he's going to be running for office for the 4th in the to be a seatmate of Matt's. And he was right there on every single point. I talked about the Scottish Enlightenment, he was right there. I talked about Frederick Bastiat and the law, he was right there. I talked about natural law, I talked about the Declaration of Independence. This guy was right there on every single one of them. And if he can come up and talk to you, I want to introduce you to Bob McCaslin Jr., ladies and gentlemen.
Good to see you, buddy.
Wow, what a privilege it is to be here tonight. I'd like to thank Matt for, first and foremost, for being my friend, for being a person that even though I'm 16 years older than he is, I can look up to. And I really appreciate that. I am running for Larry Krause's seat in the 4th District, and I hope to be another person, just like David Taylor, that Matt can blame stuff on. And David, we need to get together so we can plan some stuff. That's what we need to do. So I'm here to give the benediction, and really just what that means is that we're going to turn our attention off ourselves, off each other, and put them on the Lord Jesus Christ. We're going to focus on him for a minute, and we're going to pray, one of my favorite things to do. So if you'll bow your heads right now, close your eyes. Lord, thank you so much for all the things that you've given us. And Lord, what the most precious things you've given us are your promises. And Lord, you've promised for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in your name, there you are in the midst of them. That's why this is such a special, special occasion. And Lord, I want to thank you for our freedoms. Thank you for, we have the freedom from condemnation. We have the freedom from the power of sin. And Lord, thank you for the Trezzis and their wonderful show of hospitality tonight. Lord, I pray that you'll empower us to bring you glory. Lord, keep us humble. And Lord, we thank you for tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Just one more thing. One more thing. There's a joke going around that my supporters are telling. And it is kind of funny, so I'm going to follow Glenn Dobbs' great example of telling a good joke. I'm a kindergarten teacher by trade. The last 30 years that I've taught, about 20 years of those have been teaching kindergarten. And my friends have been reminding me of how apropos that I'm running for the state legislature, because there's just so many transferable skills there. So thanks for listening to me tonight, and give generously to Matt's campaign. Thank you.
Bob McCaslin Jr., ladies and gentlemen. All right, if that's how we're going to do it, I've got the funniest joke of the night. No, hang on. Jay Inslee. My name is Rick Rydell. I do a radio talk show at KXLY 920. It's on from 2 to 4. It talks about these values. These guys call. We save the world when we're chatting there. So if you want to hear Matt talking during the session, you want to hear the attack that we have from the leftists on our city councils, I urge you to listen to my radio program. Donate heavily tonight. Please do it. We got to have this kind of freedom. Thank you for coming out tonight. God bless you all. Take care.